The Odyssey was a quiet ship humming through the dark. It was a ship of the galactic concordance, a place where many different alien species worked together. Its smooth silver halls were built for efficiency, not for comfort. The air always smelled a little too clean, like it had been filtered 100 times. Kim Min-soo sat at his station in the data lab. His screen showed lines of ancient silent code. He was a data archaeologist. His job was to dig through the digital ruins left by dead civilizations. It was slow, careful work. He was a careful man. His black hair was neat and his jumpsuit was always clean. He preferred the company of quiet machines to loud people. The planet below them, a moon called Xylos, was a gray rock. The Concordance had scanned it. Their all-knowing computer, the Oracle, had declared the ruins on the surface to be dead and harmless. There was nothing left to find. Min-soo's job was just to make a final record. It was boring work. But he did not mind boring. Boring was safe. The door to the lab slid open with a soft hiss. Park Jun walked in. She was a xenobiologist. Her job was to study any strange life they found. So far on Xylos, she had found nothing. She leaned against Min-soo's desk, a small smile on her face. "You are still staring at that dead code?" she asked. "Min-soo, even the machines that wrote this are dust. Come and eat something." Min-soo rubbed his eyes. He felt a deep tiredness in his bones. "I will soon. I just need to finish this sequence." June looked at him more closely. She saw the dark circles under his eyes. "You look terrible. Are you sleeping at all? Or are you just reading old data all night?" Min-soo hesitated. He and June had been friends since their training days. He trusted her. "I am sleeping," he said, "but the dreams are not good." "Dreams?" June's smile faded. "What kind of dreams?" "Loud dreams," Min-soo said quietly. He looked at the silent code on his screen, but he was not seeing it. He was seeing something else. "I keep hearing a sound, like metal screaming, and then a cold feeling. A very cold, empty feeling." June put a hand on his shoulder. "It is the silence of this place. And the stress. You know what the doctors call it? Void mind. It happens to humans in deep space. Your brain gets bored and makes up its own drama." Min-soo nodded. She was probably right. The Oracle itself had said that human brains were too chaotic, too messy to have the gift of foresight. Other species in the Concordance could sometimes see glimpses of the future, but not humans. Their minds were stuck in the present, dreaming of the past, not the future. His dreams were just dreams. "Nothing more, I know," he said. "It just feels very real." Suddenly, a low beep came from his console. A new data stream had finished decoding. It was from a core they had pulled from the deepest part of the ruins. "Finally," Min-soo muttered, turning back to his work. "Maybe this one has something." He opened the file. It was not code. It was a chaotic mess of energy signatures, a recording of a death scream from a long-dead power source. As the data flooded his screen, a wave of dizziness hit him. The lights in the lab seemed to flicker. "June, do you feel that?" he asked, his voice tight. "Feel what?" she replied, looking around. Everything is normal. But for Min-soo, everything was changing. The hum of the ship faded away, replaced by a high-pitched whine. The lab melted around him. He was not in the lab anymore. He was floating. He could see the ship, the beautiful silver Odyssey, from the outside. Then he saw it. A bright, angry flash of light erupted from the port-side engine. It was not an explosion from an attack. It was something breaking from the inside. The light was a sickly purple-white, the color of a dying star. Then came the sound. The screaming metal from his dreams. It was 1,000 times louder now, tearing through the void. The vision pulled him closer. He saw the engine's outer shell crack open like an egg. He saw pieces of the ship, large and small, fly out into the blackness. He felt a cold so deep it was like fire. The vacuum. He saw the emergency doors of the ship slamming shut, trapping people, saving others. He saw the main lights of the Odyssey go dark, replaced by the dim red glow of emergency power. He saw it all. Perfectly. Horribly. In a few seconds. It was not a guess. It was a memory of something that had not happened yet. The vision vanished. Min-soo was on his hands and knees on the cold floor of the lab. His head was pounding. His mouth was dry. He could hear June's voice, but it sounded far away. "Min-soo! Min-soo, what happened? Are you okay?" He looked up. Her face was pale with fear. He tried to speak, but only a croak came out. He swallowed, his throat aching. "The port engine," he gasped. "The containment field. It's going to fail. June stared at him. What are you talking about? The ship's systems are all green. You had a seizure or something? No, Minsu said, his voice stronger now, filled with a desperate urgency. He pushed himself up, leaning heavily on the console. It's going to happen. I saw it, the purple light, the explosion. We have to warn the bridge. He stumbled to the comm panel on the wall. His hand shook as he pressed the button for the bridge. A calm voice answered. Bridge here. This is Captain Lee Hanul. Captain, Minsu said, trying to keep his voice steady. This is Kim Minsu in the data lab. I am reporting a critical systems pre-failure. The port engine's primary containment field. It will rupture. There was a pause on the other end. He could imagine the captain's face. Lee Hanul was a strong, confident leader. She believed in facts and data. Kim Minsu, her voice came back calm and firm. My engineering display shows all systems are optimal. There are no warnings. What is the basis for your report? Minsu closed his eyes. How could he explain? I saw it, Captain. You saw it. On a scanner? Which one? Not on a scanner, Minsu admitted, his heart sinking. In a vision, a dream just now. The silence from the bridge was longer this time. It was a heavy, uncomfortable silence. Kim Minsu, Captain Hanul said finally. Her voice was still polite, but it was colder now. I think the stress of this mission is getting to you. The silence of Xylos can play tricks on the human mind. I recommend you go to the medbay and get checked. Hanul out. The comm link went dead. Minsu stood there, his forehead resting against the cool wall. He had failed. He had told them the truth, and they had called him sick. June was still watching him, her expression a mix of worry and confusion. Minsu, a vision? He turned to look at her. The fear from the dream was still fresh in his eyes. It was real, June, more real than this room is right now. The ship is going to be destroyed, and no one will believe me. He looked out the lab's viewport at the silent gray moon below. The oracle said humans can't dream the future. Everyone knew it was a fact. But as Minsu remembered the screaming metal and the freezing dark, he knew one thing for certain. The facts were wrong. The silence on the Odyssey felt different after Minsu's warning. It was no longer the quiet of empty space. It was a heavy, waiting silence. The crew members he passed in the hallways did not look him in the eye. They would nod quickly and then look away. He heard a few whispers as he walked by. They thought he was sick. They thought his mind had broken from the isolation. Minsu went to the medbay just as Captain Hanul had suggested. The doctor, a calm woman from a species with gentle blue skin, scanned him. Your stress hormones are elevated, Kim Minsu, she said, looking at her screen. But there is no sign of neural damage or seizure activity. It is most likely a severe episode of void mind. Your brain is creating stimuli to fight the boredom. I can give you a sedative for sleep. Minsu refused the medicine. He was afraid to sleep. What if he had another dream? What if he saw the end again, but with more details? He thanked the doctor and left. He went straight to find Park June. She was in her biology lab, staring at a petri dish with a resigned look. She looked up when he entered. How are you feeling? She asked. Her voice was careful. They think I am crazy, Minsu said, his voice flat. But I am not. June, you have to believe me. What I saw, it was real. June gestured to a chair. Sit, tell me exactly what you saw. Every detail, so he did. He described the exact location of the rupture in the engine. He talked about the specific color of the energy flash, a purple-white that he had never seen in any engine before. He explained how the explosion tore the hull open in a precise, jagged line. He told her about the sequence of the emergency doors slamming shut, which ones closed first, which ones failed. He even described the code that flashed on a secondary engineering panel just before the blast, a code he should not have known. When he finished, June was quiet for a long time. She tapped her fingers on the table. That is very specific, she finally said. For a dream. It was not a dream, Minsu insisted. It was a warning. June took a deep breath. She was a scientist. She believed in evidence. Minsu's vision was not evidence. It was a story, but it was a very detailed technical story, and he was her friend. Okay, she said. Let's say for a moment that you are not crazy. We need proof, something the captain and the engineers will believe. We cannot just say Minsu had a bad dream. They will send us both to the medbay. How can we get proof? Minsu asked, a small spark of hope in his chest. Your vision started with a fluctuation in the containment field, right? Before the big explosion? Minsu nodded. Well, June said, a determined look on her face. The ship's main computer logs everything. Every tiny blip, every small change in power. Even things too small to trigger an alarm. If there is a problem with the port engine, the data will be there. We just have to find it. But we do not have access to the engineering logs, Minsu said. That is high-level security. Only the captain and the chief engineer can see all of that. June smiled a little. The chief engineer owes me a favor. I helped him identify a fungus that was growing on his favorite plant. And I still have my security clearance from the last biohazard drill. I can get us into the low-level diagnostic history. It will not give us control, but it will let us look. It was a risk. If they were caught, they could be in serious trouble. But Minsu saw no other choice. Later that night, when the ship's cycle was in its quiet period, they met in a small, unused office near the engineering sector. June used a console there to access the ship's network. Her fingers flew over the screen, bypassing security layers with practiced ease. Okay, she whispered. I am in. Port engine, containment field stability logs. Let's see what we have. Lines of data scrolled down the screen. Most of it was a steady, boring green. Normal. 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 Minsu's heart sank. Maybe he was crazy after all. Maybe the stress had finally gotten to him. Wait, June said, leaning closer. Look at this. She pointed to a single line of data from 2 days ago. It was a tiny, almost invisible spike in the magnetic constrictor field. It lasted for less than a second. The system had classified it as a minor power anomaly and had not even flagged it for review. That's it, Minsu said, his voice trembling. He recognized the energy signature from his vision. It was the same. That is the start. The field flickered. In my dream, that flicker gets bigger and more frequent until it breaks. June pulled up more data. She found 2 more of these tiny spikes, each one slightly larger than the last. The most recent one was just a few hours ago. The pattern is there, she said, her face pale in the screen's light. It is getting worse. The computer is not seeing it because each event is too small on its own, but you saw the whole pattern before it even happened. They had their proof. It was not much, but it was something. It was data. They copied the information onto a data slate and went to see Captain Hanul first thing in the morning. The captain was on the bridge, sipping a cup of tea as she looked at the star chart. She did not look happy to see them. Kim Minsu Park June, she said. This is not a good time. Captain, we have found something, June said, holding up the data slate. Evidence. Captain Hanul took the slate and scanned the data. Her expression did not change. She handed it back. This is nothing, she said. Power fluctuations happen all the time on a ship this complex. The systems are designed to handle them. This is not proof of an impending disaster. This is proof of a normally functioning ship. But Captain, Minsu pleaded, the pattern is clear. The fluctuations are getting stronger. My vision showed that the next one will not correct itself. It will cascade. It will cause a full rupture. Captain Hanul looked at him. She was not a cruel woman, but she was a practical one. She trusted the Oracle. She trusted her ship, and she trusted data she could understand. A human's dream was not data she could understand. Kim Minsu, she said, her voice firm. I understand you are afraid, but I cannot and will not order a full engine shutdown and a days-long diagnostic based on a bad dream and 3 tiny power spikes. It would strand us here for a week. It would use up resources we cannot spare. The mission would be a failure. She looked at both of them. The subject is closed. Do not access the engineering logs again. That is an order. Return to your duties. They were dismissed. As they walked out of the bridge, Minsu felt a crushing weight on his chest. He had tried. He had used data, and it had still not been enough. The news spread through the ship quickly. The human data archaeologist and the biologist had tried to challenge the captain with made-up evidence. Some people looked at Minsu with pity. Others looked at him with anger. He was causing trouble. He was creating fear. He was moved from his data lab to a smaller, isolated office. His access to the main computer was restricted. He was given busy work to do, sorting old files that did not need sorting. He was being put away where he could not cause any more problems. He sat in his new small office and looked at the gray wall. Outside his door, he could hear the normal sounds of the ship, the hum of the engine, the quiet talk of the crew. They all thought everything was fine, but Minsu knew. The clock was ticking. He had seen the future and no one would listen. He was alone with a terrible secret. The only thing left to do was wait for the nightmare to become real. The next 2 days were the longest of Kim Min-soo's life. He did his meaningless work in the small office. He ate his meals when the mess hall was empty. He avoided the looks from the other crew. Park Jun was the only one who still talked to him. She brought him his food sometimes. She tried to talk about normal things, but the worry was always in her eyes. Min-soo could not think about normal things. He was waiting. Every time the ship's hum changed its tone, his heart would jump. Every time a door hissed open too quickly, he would flinch. He felt like a man waiting for a bomb to go off, a bomb that only he could see. He was in his office staring at a screen of useless data when he felt it. A tiny, almost imperceptible vibration through the floor. It was different. It was wrong. He knew this feeling. It was the start. He stood up, his chair rolling back and hitting the wall. He had to get to the bridge. He had to make them listen one last time. He ran out into the hallway. The lights flickered once, then returned to normal. A few crew members in the hall looked up, confused. Then the alarm screamed. It was a loud, piercing sound he remembered from his dream. Red emergency lights began to flash, painting the silver walls the color of blood. The ship shuddered violently. Min-soo was thrown against the wall. He felt the impact in his shoulder. The screaming sound started. It was the sound of metal tearing itself apart. It was exactly the sound from his vision. It was 1,000 times louder in real life. The floor tilted. The artificial gravity was failing. Min-soo grabbed a handle on the wall to stop himself from floating away. A voice, the captain's voice, came over the ship-wide comm. It was tight with control, but he could hear the fear underneath. All crew, emergency stations. Containment failure in port engine. Brace for impact! Seal all bulkheads. It was too late. Min-soo knew it was too late. He had seen this part. The explosion ripped through the ship. The lights went out completely, plunging the hallway into absolute darkness. For a terrifying moment, there was only the sound of the alarm, the screaming metal, and the panic of people shouting. Then the red emergency lights flickered on. They were dim. The air was getting cold. The ship was losing heat. Min-soo pulled himself along the wall, hand over hand, toward the med bay. In his dream, that was where he had to go. The hallway was a scene of chaos. A pipe had burst, spraying steam into the corridor. He saw a crew member with a cut on her forehead floating limply. He pushed past her, his heart pounding. He had to get to the med bay. He reached the doors. They were sealed shut. The emergency system had locked them. He pounded on the metal. "Jun!" he shouted. "Are you in there?" A moment later, the door slid open a crack. Jun's face appeared pale and scared. She pulled him inside. The med bay was crowded with injured people. The doctor was working quickly, her blue hands moving from one patient to the next. The room was lit only by the red lights and the glow of medical screens. The ship gave another violent shudder, and then everything went still. The terrible sound of tearing metal stopped. The only sounds were the moans of the injured, the hiss of escaping air from somewhere deeper in the ship, and the relentless blare of the alarm. The door to the med bay opened again. Captain Lee Hanol stood there. Her uniform was torn. There was a smudge of black on her cheek. Her eyes, which were always so sure and confident, were wide with shock. She looked around the damaged med bay at the injured crew, and then her gaze found Min-soo. She walked toward him. The room fell silent. Everyone was watching. She stopped in front of him. For a long moment, she just looked at him. She looked at the man she had called sick, the man she had ignored, the man she had punished. "Kim Min-soo," she said. Her voice was quiet, but it carried through the silent room. She did not sound like a captain giving an order. She sounded like a lost person asking for directions. "What happens next?" Min-soo stared at her. His shoulder ached. He could feel a trickle of blood on his forehead. The cold was seeping into his bones. This was the moment from his dream, too. This exact moment. "In my dream," he said, his voice hoarse. "The explosion is not the end." He closed his eyes, trying to remember the final, terrible part of the vision, the part he had tried to forget. The debris, the pieces of our ship that were blown out. They are pulled by the planet's gravity. They are like rocks falling. They will hit the moon xylos. They will hit in a specific pattern in specific weak points in the moon's crust. He opened his eyes and looked at the captain. Her face was a mask of dread. The impacts will start a chain reaction in the moon's core. It is unstable, the moon. It will not just break apart. It will implode. It will collapse into itself. It will happen in a few hours. Everything here, the ruins, any evidence of what happened to us, will be gone, destroyed. The silence in the med bay was heavier than the darkness outside. The implosion of a moon was a force of nature they could not survive. It would send out shockwaves. It would turn the space around it into a storm of rock and dust. Their dying ship would be crushed. Captain Hunnell swallowed hard. The mission was no longer about saving the Odyssey. The ship was already dead. It was about saving the truth. "We have to warn the Concordance," she said. "We have to tell them what happened here. We have to tell them about you." "The long-range communicator is destroyed," a voice said from the corner. It was the communications officer, his arm in a sling. "The explosion took it out. We have no way to call for help." "What about the subspace buoy?" June asked, stepping forward. "The one at the edge of the system. It is a relay station. It can send a message." The communications officer shook his head. "The buoy is owned by the Concordance. It needs a Priority 1 authentication code to send a message that important. Only the Oracle can give that code. We would have to link with the Oracle directly from here." Captain Hunnell looked around the broken med bay at her wounded crew, at her dying ship. Then she looked back at Minsu. Her eyes were different now. They were not the eyes of a captain who knew all the answers. They were the eyes of someone who had just seen the impossible and now had to believe in it. "Then that is what we will do," she said, her voice finding its strength again. "We will link with the Oracle. And you, Kim Minsu, will have to make it believe you." The bridge was a tomb. The main view screen was a web of cracks, showing only a distorted piece of the black sky. Consoles sparked and smoked. Wires hung from the ceiling like vines. The air was thick with the smell of burned plastic and metal. The red emergency lights made the destruction look even more terrible. Captain Lee Hunnell sat in her broken chair. Her hands moved over the one working console. Her face was set in a mask of concentration. Kim Minsu stood beside her, his body aching. Park Jun stood on his other side, a steady, silent support. "We have power for one short-range transmission," the captain said, her voice tight. "The signal is weak. The Oracle might not even hear us. We have to try," June whispered. Hunnell entered the final commands. A low hum filled the bridge as the communication system came online. A small flickering screen lit up. Words appeared on it. "Concordance Network. State your identity and purpose. This is Captain Lee Hunnell of the exploration vessel Odyssey. Our ship identification is Gamma 79er. We are issuing a Priority 1 disaster warning." There was a pause. Then the words changed. Priority 1 authorization is required. Provide nature of disaster. Hunnell took a deep breath. The disaster has already occurred. Our ship has been destroyed by a catastrophic failure of the port engine containment field. We have multiple casualties. The ship is not salvageable. Another pause. Log confirmed. Odyssey status. Lost. Message noted. Is there a request for assistance? That is not the full disaster, Hunnell said quickly. The debris from our ship will trigger a chain reaction in the moon's xylos. The moon will implode within hours. This entire system will become unstable. A warning must be sent to all Concordance ships to stay away. The screen was still for a long time. That conclusion is not supported by astrophysical models. Xylo's core is stable. The premise is invalid. The premise is valid, Hunnell insisted, her composure cracking. We have a witness. A crew member who predicted the engine failure before it happened. He also predicted the moon's implosion. Provide name and rank of crew member. Hunnell looked at Minsu. He leaned toward the console microphone, his heart pounding in his ears. My name is Kim Minsu. I am a human, a data archaeologist. The response was immediate. The words flashed onto the screen, cold and final. The premise is invalid. Human neuropathways are incapable of temporal foresight. Your report is contaminated by irrational data. Priority 1 authorization denied. Minsu felt a cold wave of despair. It was worse than he thought. The Oracle was not just a machine. It was a set of rules, and one of its most basic rules was that humans could not see the future. To the Oracle, he was not a prophet. He was a liar or a lunatic. His evidence was not evidence at all. It was a system error. Please, Captain Hanul said, her voice desperate. You have our ship's logs. You can see the engine fluctuations. You can see they match his prediction. The data shows minor power anomalies. The conclusion of catastrophic failure was not logically derivable from that data. The human statement remains an illogical input. Authorization denied. June grabbed Minsu's arm. It does not believe you, she said, her voice shaking. It cannot believe you. To believe you, it would have to admit that its understanding of the universe is wrong. Minsu stared at the flickering screen. The Oracle saw him as a bug in its code. A piece of bad information. How do you prove you are real to a god that thinks you are a fantasy? He thought hard. Arguing about the past was useless. The Oracle had already decided the engine failure was an unpredictable accident. He had to give it something new. Something it could not explain away. He remembered something else from his vision. A small, unimportant detail. Something that was about to happen. Captain, he said suddenly. Ask it. Ask it to analyze the ship's external sensors. Right now. For micro-impacts. Hanul looked confused but turned back to the console. Oracle, scan the hull of the Odyssey for any recent micro-impacts. Provide a prediction for the next series of impacts. The screen changed. Scanning. Hull has sustained multiple micro-impacts from debris field, predicting future spatio-temporal events of random cosmic particles is beyond the capability of shipboard sensors. Tell it I can, Minsu said, a new wild hope in his chest. Tell it I will predict the next micrometeor shower. The exact time, the exact location of the impacts on the hull. Hanul's eyes widened. She understood. She relayed the message. The Oracle's response was almost dismissive. Such a prediction would require impossible precision. The human cannot provide this. I can, Minsu said firmly into the microphone. He closed his eyes, blocking out the broken bridge, the smell of smoke, the cold. He reached back into the vision. He looked for the small silent hits against the ship's skin. He saw them, a pattern in the chaos. He opened his eyes and looked at a blank screen on a broken console. He began to speak, describing the events that did not exist yet. In 7 minutes and 12 seconds, a cluster of 7 micrometeors will hit the ship. The first will strike on the starboard side, section D4, near the damaged life support panel. The second will hit 2 seconds later, on the port side, section A9, just below the main antenna array. He continued. He listed all 7 impacts. He gave the exact time for each one down to the second. He gave the exact location for each one using the ship's own grid system. When he finished, the only sound was the faint hiss of the comlink. The Oracle's response was a single line. Observation commencing. 7 minutes, 12 seconds remain. No one on the bridge moved. No one spoke. The 7 minutes felt like a lifetime. Minsu watched the numbers on the screen count down. He felt June's hand gripping his. He saw Captain Hanul staring at the screen, her knuckles white. This was his proof. If he was wrong, they would all die and no one would ever know what happened to the Odyssey. If he was right, he would break the Oracle's reality. The countdown reached 0. The message was sent. A tiny digital whisper, carrying the truth of their destruction and the miracle of Minsu's mind, raced toward the concordance. On the broken bridge, there was no celebration. There was only a deep, tired silence. They had won a great victory, but they were still on a dying ship. Captain Hanul stood up. The moment of relief was gone. The captain was back in her eyes. Everyone to the escape pods, she said, her voice clear and strong. The message is sent. Our mission now is to survive. Move quickly but in order. Help those who are injured. The crew, who had been frozen in awe, suddenly sprang into action. It was a controlled chaos. They moved through the broken hallways, gathering the wounded, heading for the few escape pods that had not been damaged in the explosion. Minsu and June helped a limping engineer toward the pod bay. The ship groaned around them, a deep, sad sound of a great machine giving up. The air was getting thinner and colder. They reached the pod bay. It was a crowded, frantic scene. People were squeezing into the small, round pods. Each pod could only hold a few people. Captain Hanul was at the door directing everyone. June, Minsu in here, she said, pointing to a pod that was almost full. They climbed in. The space was tight and dark. The door sealed with a heavy clunk, cutting off the noise from the bay. For a moment there was only the sound of their breathing. Then a violent lurch threw them against the walls. The escape pod was launched. Through the small, thick window, Minsu watched as the Odyssey fell away. It was a sad and broken sight. A silver bird with a broken wing floating silently in the dark. Their pod, along with 3 others, moved away from the ship. They flew toward the nearby moon Xylos. They needed to put some distance between themselves and the dying ship before the moon itself was destroyed. They drifted in silence for a while, watching the stars. Then Jin pointed at the window. Look, the debris from the Odyssey, thousands of pieces of metal and plastic, was being pulled by the moon's gravity. It was like a slow-motion rain of glittering dust. The pieces began to hit the gray surface of Xylos. They were too small to see from this far away, but they knew it was happening. Just as Minsu had said, for a long time nothing happened. The moon sat there, silent and gray as always. Some of the crew in the pod began to whisper. Maybe Minsu was wrong about this part. Maybe the moon would be fine. But Minsu knew. He watched, his face calm. He had already seen this, then they felt it. A deep vibration through space itself. It was not a sound, but a feeling in their bones. On the surface of Xylos, a thin crack appeared. It glowed with a faint orange light. Then another crack appeared, and another. Soon the whole surface of the moon was covered in a web of glowing lines. It was beautiful and terrifying. The moon did not explode. It began to collapse. The surface fell inward like a ball of sand that had a hole punched in the bottom. It was silent. It was slow. The moon crumpled in on itself, getting smaller and smaller. In a few minutes, where a large moon had been, there was now only a dense spinning cloud of rock and dust. The pod was rocked by a wave of energy. The crew held on as their small craft was tossed about. Then it passed. The space where Xylos had been was empty. No one in the pod spoke. They had just witnessed the end of a world. They had also witnessed the proof that Kim Minsu's vision was true in every detail. After a while, a light on the control panel began to blink. A ship was approaching. A Concordance rescue vessel, sent in response to their warning. They were saved. Weeks later, Minsu stood on the observation deck of the rescue ship, heading back to Earth. He was looking at the stars. He was a different man. He was no longer the quiet data archaeologist who liked boring work. He was the man who had dreamed the future. The door slid open behind him. Captain Lee Hanro walked in. She stood beside him, also looking at the stars. She had been offered a promotion for her leadership. She had not given an answer yet. They are calling you the first dreamer, she said quietly. Minsu nodded. He had heard the name. The news had spread through the Concordance. A human who could see the future. It had caused a great disturbance. Scientists and philosophers were arguing. The very foundations of what they knew about the mind were being questioned. The Oracle's final message to you, Hanul said. What did it mean? Your existence is a new variable. Minsu thought about it. I think it meant that I do not fit in its old equations, he said. The Oracle thought it understood everything. It had a rule for how the universe worked. Humans were not part of the future-seeing rule. I was a piece that did not fit, a new variable in its math, and now? Hanul asked. Now it has to change its math, Minsu said. He looked at his own reflection in the glass. He saw a simple human face, but behind that face was a mind that could reach through time. They all do. He thought about the future. He knew he would not have a quiet life. There would be tests and questions and probably fear from some people. But there would also be wonder. He had opened a door for all of humanity. He had shown that they were more than what the galaxy thought they were. He was not a god. He was just a man who had a bad dream. But because he believed in it and because he fought for it, he had changed everything. The Oracle claimed humans can't dream the future. It was a fact everyone knew. But Kim Minsu dreamed, and because he did, the universe had to learn a new truth.